That was Savatage with Ghost in the Ruins. And you heard Pyramaze before that with Ghost Light. I'm Ken the Metal Professor. This is the Halloween edition of Mostly Metal here on WVLP 103.1 FM or WVLP.org. Tiny little station in tiny little Valparaiso, Indiana. Being that it's getting close to the top of the hour, I don't want to break my momentum of the last 8 weeks and miss Ken's Dark Corner, but I want to leave as much time as possible for this Halloween heavy metal celebration. So I know I've said this every week, but I'm going to try to keep it short. In 6 minutes or less, episode 9 of Ken's Dark Corner, I'll tell you about the Rob Zombie movies that I've seen recently. I hope you find that interesting. Episode 9 of Ken's Dark Corner. I haven't missed a week since I started doing this, and I thought about missing this week, but that would set a bad precedent. But I am going to have to make it snappy because I have an hour of music pre-programmed starting at 9 o'clock, and if I go over 9 o'clock with this, that'll mess everything up. I'm trying to decide if I should keep the Spooky Tangerine Dream in the background for Halloween. I think I will. What the heck? It doesn't really match the movie selection. I've been brewing over this one for a few weeks. I'd mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I had been poking around in Rob Zombie's non-Halloween movies, which might be silly to do a Halloween episode of Mostly Metal when I'm talking about Rob Zombie movies, not including his entries into the Halloween franchise. But with the new Halloween movie coming out, it's possible that sometime in the next few weeks I might do an episode on Halloween remakes, in which case those zombie movies would fit right in. So let's forget them for a second. There are 4 other horror films directed by Rob Zombie, other than Halloween and Halloween 2, his remakes of those, or reboots, or whatever you want to call them. And let's start from the most recent and work our way back. I mentioned these a couple of weeks ago when my episode of Ken's Dark Corner was just about all the different stuff you can watch on streaming services. And I mentioned that The Lords of Salem and 31 were both available on Tubi. And if you haven't nabbed Tubi yet, I recommend that you install it because you do have to deal with breaks for ads. But it's a free app and they have a really good selection, especially of older horror movies, like 60s and 70s, which these aren't. These happen to be in there. Zombie's most recent movie from 2016 that I watched on Tubi a few weeks ago was 31. And in this movie, apparently 31 is the name of a game that the killers or the villains play on their victims who are trapped inside a structure, like an old house or warehouse kind of thing. They don't really explain the rules of 31. So 31 basically is a game where the killers run around with their knives and whatever, and they terrify the people that they are chasing. And that's 31. I don't really know anything more specific than that, so the rules were not set up. This movie I did not like overall. I thought the dialogue, even for a Rob Zombie movie, was pretty bad. I'm not averse to, F-bombs and things like that, but this was just like every other word, and it got annoying. The characters are kind of bland. There was no real good character to the villains, and the style of it was just way too much herky-jerky camera work. There wasn't much of a plot to it other than, hey, there's some people in this building and these other people are playing this game called 31 and they're going to try to kill them, and then you see gruesome things happening. Can't recommend it. The one before that was The Lords of Salem. This came out in 2012, and the initiative in this movie is that some people are working for a radio station, and a band called The Lords of Salem delivers some spooky music that they have written. This town happens to be in a place where witches were burned at the stake a long time ago, and it turns out that this music does something to sort of bring the spirits of the witches back and try to take over the town again. So this music gets played on the radio station and strange things ensue. The music was spooky, but it was pretty bad, and I don't know a radio station that will just take a random CD that gets mailed in off the street that isn't very good and just plays it over and over and over again. Maybe once, but I don't know. So that was kind of strange. But unlike 31, this movie had a really good visual style with really good set pieces and color and lighting. The use of shadows was nice. The story kind of fizzled out after a while. But I think the visuals of the movie carried it well enough that I can recommend it. The biggest problem with it, though, is that if anything interesting starts to happen to one of the characters in this movie, it's going to turn out to have been a dream sequence. Right. So that gets kind of irritating after a while, too. But all in all, I would say you could watch The Lords of Salem and be entertained by it, if nothing else for the visual style. His most famous movies are The House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects. These came out in 2003 and 2005. House of a Thousand Corpses was Rob Zombie doing basically the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but not called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, it does fit for my show tonight because House of a Thousand Corpses takes place on Halloween Eve and Halloween itself. The movie is very stylish, but there's some herky-jerky changes in color palette and focus and things like that that can get distracting. And it switches back and forth between quote-unquote standard cinematography and more music video-like segments. And I really wasn't on board with that. There's a character in this movie and The Devil's Rejects called Tiny, who is a 7'4" guy named Matthew, and I'm blanking on his last name, but unfortunately he passed away after these two movies were made. But he makes a really, really interesting character, and I would have liked to see more about him. In The Devil's Rejects, the villains, the family from House of a Thousand Corpses, that's the famous one is Captain Spaulding and Otis and Baby. They're the family that does nasty things to people. They are now on the run. This movie is gritty and it loses a little bit of the cinema mode to music video mode shifting. I actually like this one the best of the four. I thought it was terrific until about the last 45 minutes. When the first half of the movie was concentrating on the Firefly family, that's their name, and what they were up to and what they were doing while they were on the run. That was intriguing and gripping. Then the story shifted over into following this wackadoodle sheriff who is supposedly the good guy, but he's just another evil person. He's a cartoon. He thinks he's Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver. He even talks to himself in the mirror. And it switches to being a lot of style over substance in the second half of the movie. So I thought it was going along really well, and then suddenly it kind of went for me. But all in all, I would still recommend it. So House of a Thousand Corpses, it has a medium recommendation, but you do want to see that before you watch The Devil's Rejects. If you're into gore and gruesome, gritty things, I can recommend The Devil's Rejects, although I think the first half is much stronger than the second half. The Lords of Salem, I recommend, if nothing else, than for its visual style. The story is meh, but it's a great movie to watch. I think that's where Rob Zombie really hit his stride in terms of the visuals. And then his most recent work, 31, I would just say avoid it. There's really not a whole lot there to recommend. I'm sure lots of people have different opinions, and that's why things like this are great, because not everybody likes to hear the same thing. I'm thinking about going over the 6 Paranormal Activity movies next week because I just finished watching them. And hey, I finished almost at 9 o'clock. It's only a 1 or 2 minute overrun. I think we can live with it. This has been Ken's Dark Corner on WVLP. I'm Ken the Metal Professor. That's what I think about Rob Zombie movies. You probably don't care what I think, but I have the microphone, so too bad. The next hour of Mostly Metal here on WVLP is all about Halloween heavy metal. And to kick things off, we're going to have a song about a devil in a belfry. Then you'll hear about a tool of the devil. Then you'll hear about a pale haunt departing. And then you'll hear about a haunted palace. So I hope you enjoy the next 18 minutes and 35 seconds.